The salute cracked the silence like gunfire. Cameras flashed, folders hit desks, and for the first time in my life, a four-star general was looking at me. Not my name, not my uniform, me. He raised his hand, slow, deliberate. Every officer in the room followed. I remember the echo of boots against tile, the air tasting of metal and paper. That moment shouldn't have belonged to me, but it did. The hum of fluorescent lights was louder than the people. That was always true of Fort Liberty's visitor center. Too clean, too bright, always smelling faintly of antiseptic and burnt coffee. I'd come in early that morning to help process walk-ins when I saw him. A gray-haired veteran hunched over a clipboard, pen shaking between thick fingers scarred by time. He wasn't making progress. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I stepped from behind the counter. "Sir, do you need help?" He didn't look up, just kept mouthing the question he couldn't ask, so I signed instead, slow, deliberate. "Need help?" He froze. Then his shoulders dropped as if someone had loosened a strap that had been cutting him for years. He signed back, hands rough but steady. "Form D2401?" I smiled and pointed to the right line. Around us, boots squeaked on tile. A printer jam beeped in the background. The veteran's breath caught when he realized I understood every word his hands formed. Up on the mezzanine, a cluster of soldiers leaned against the railing, whispering. "That's Captain Whitaker, right?" One murmured. "The paper soldier." "Logistics. Never saw combat." "Disgrace to the name." The words carried even over the hum. I pretended not to hear, but my fingers hesitated mid-sign. The veteran noticed. He tilted his head, asking silently, "You okay?" Before I could answer, a voice from above cut through the noise. "Captain Whitaker." General Leonard Huxley stood on the mezzanine, 4 stars catching the cold fluorescent light. His expression unreadable. He watched me finish signing, then gave the faintest nod before disappearing down the corridor. The whispers stopped. Even the printer jam went quiet, like the building itself was holding its breath. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first time someone in power actually saw me. That night, the smell of gun oil still clung to my sleeves. I sat in my quarters, peeling the Velcro off my name tag and thinking about the word disgrace. My father had used it like punctuation. Sergeant Miles Whitaker. Vietnam, Gulf, 2 tours, 2 Bronze Stars, and 1 daughter, who never lived up to his legend. He used to wake us before dawn for drills in the backyard, Paige and me standing at attention in our pajamas while he barked orders that neighbors mistook for play. "Discipline isn't abuse," he'd say when Mom pleaded with him to stop. "It's love with a purpose." For Paige, it worked. She absorbed his rhythm like oxygen, every breath another command fulfilled. I was the quiet one, the reader, the map drawer, the girl who wanted to know how supplies reached the front, not how to fire them when they did. When I told him I was joining the Army as a logistics officer, he didn't even shout. He just stared at me across the dinner table, eyes the color of tarnished brass. "Boxes and paperwork," he said finally. "That's what you call service? You'll never see mud on your boots. You'll die a disgrace in uniform." He never took it back. After his funeral, the house smelled like starch and dust. Paige handled everything: the folded flag, the speeches, the photo displays with his medals lined like currency. She looked like him when she smiled, sharp, calculated. She built Sutton Defense Solutions out of that smile. To honor Dad, she told reporters, contracts rolled in. Her name went on plaques. Mine went on shipping manifests. We drifted, 2 satellites of the same dead planet. Late evenings at the base were my favorite. The air conditioning hissed like wind through grass. I'd sit alone in the audit room, surrounded by filing cabinets, their metal edges cool against my fingertips. That night after the visitor center shift, I opened the bottom drawer where I kept my father's old letters, sun yellow paper, edges curled, typed on some battered field typewriter. None were addressed to anyone, just fragments of thought. Honor is a currency that loses value when shared too freely. A soldier's silence is proof of endurance, not weakness. I used to wonder if he wrote them for me but lost the courage to sign. Or maybe for Paige, the child he understood. I kept them anyway, as if ink could replace approval. The air in the room carried the faint tang of machine oil and recycled air. My phone buzzed. A message from Paige. Dinner next month? Need a favor? Call me. I didn't reply. Morning came gray and metallic. Parade field drills echoed through the window like distant thunder. I poured instant coffee into a paper cup and thought about the veteran's trembling hands. The way he'd looked at me, surprised that someone remembered his language. Dad used to mock sign language. Talk with your voice, June. Real soldiers speak up. But I'd learned it anyway from a volunteer program in high school. I liked its quiet precision, the way emotion traveled through fingertips instead of volume. Maybe that's why the general had stopped to watch. Maybe he recognized something my father never did. When I left the barracks that day, the wind carried the smell of jet fuel from the airstrip. Sharp, clean, alive. The base chapel bell struck 9 times, each note vibrating through my chest like distant artillery. I looked toward the flag at half-mast and caught my reflection in its glass casing. A woman in fatigues, posture perfect, eyes tired. My father's ghost stared back. He'd called me a disgrace, but the word had aged like metal in the rain, losing shine, gaining weight. Every syllable still clanged when I walked through a corridor lined with portraits of men who believed heroism meant noise. I adjusted my collar, squared my shoulders, and whispered to no one, "Disgrace reports for duty." The automatic door hissed open. Inside, the day's first line of veterans waited, each with a folder, each with a story, erased by bureaucracy. At the counter stood Arthur Bellamy again, clutching the same clipboard. He signed a single sentence that would detonate everything I thought I knew. He signed fast this time, eyes locked on mine. Your father promised me a commendation, 1998. My pen slipped. Coffee rippled. They said it was lost. The room tilted. Before I could speak, the overhead speaker cracked with static. Captain Whitaker, report to command. The rest dissolved in white noise. Cut to black. The static still rang in my ears when I stepped into command. Fluorescent light flared off every metal surface, cruelly bright. The air smelled of toner and burnt circuits. Major Elkins barely looked up from his monitor. Captain Whitaker, visitor center report, signed yet? I nodded, though my pulse was nowhere near calm. Good. You've got audit clearance this month, right? Logistics migration? Yes, sir. Then stay late tonight. It's flagged corrupted archives, contractor side. Might be nothing. He waved me off. Might be nothing, the Army's favorite sentence. Outside, the corridor buzzed with printers and footsteps. I pressed my palm to the wall, its paint warm from the wiring beneath. For the first time in years, I felt that faint tremor under the surface of procedure, like the base itself was holding a secret. The audit room was my element, a kingdom of order, cables, and silence. Rows of drives blinked red and green like patient eyes in the dark. The only sound was the tick of the cooling fan. I typed Whitaker, Miles J. into the personnel archive. Access denied. I tried again, rerouting through internal audit. Result, file removed, migration. Sutton Defense Solutions, APR 2016. My breath caught. The cursor blinked like a pulse on a monitor gone flatline. I dug deeper, tracing the migration log. A pattern emerged. Hundreds of commendations reassigned, altered, or missing. Most belonged to veterans now retired or deceased. Each deletion bore the same signature. P. Sutton, admin key, NAR A03. Page. The glow from the screen painted my hands ghost blue. The hum of the fan grew into a roar in my skull. Flashback. Dad's voice at the dinner table years ago. You can't fake honor, June. Either you earn it or you steal someone else's shine. I'd rolled my eyes. He'd slammed his fist on the table hard enough to make the salt shaker jump. Don't ever let paperwork decide what you're worth. Now the paperwork was deciding his worth, and Paige was the one rewriting it. I printed the log, the machine coughing warm paper and ozone. 3 pages, then 4. When I reached for page 5, the printer froze. A red message blinked. Unauthorized reproduction, classified material. Someone was watching the system. I yanked the plug. The silence that followed was heavy, chemical. My fingers smelled of burnt plastic. Arthur Bellamy was waiting outside the building, same clipboard clutched to his chest. He signed one word. Found? I hesitated, scanning the parking lot. Cameras everywhere. Then I nodded once. He signed slower this time. They erased it? Yes, I whispered. And not just yours. He looked past me toward the flagpole swaying under the sodium light. Then his hands moved with surgical precision. When a record dies, a name dies with it. Don't let them bury him again. His expression was calm, but his eyes, clear gray, were almost fierce. I realized he wasn't asking for his medal. He was asking for witness. I wanted to promise something heroic. Instead, I said, I'll fix it. He smiled faintly. Patience under fire, he signed. You taught me that today. Back in my quarters, I laid the printed pages beneath my father's old photo, the one from his first deployment, edges cracked, him standing in dust with that impossible posture. The smell of gun oil still clung to the frame. I brushed dust from his cheek in the picture like it mattered. You taught me to count every bullet, I said quietly. Guess I'll start counting lies. At 0200, I was still combing through procurement data. Each line item was a breadcrumb. Fake maintenance invoices, ghost equipment, falsified veteran benefits routed through shell contractors, pages web, each thread labeled with some patriotic acronym. Then I hit a locked partition titled Heritage Reclamation. Password required. I entered Whitaker, 1998. Access granted. Inside were scanned commendations with altered names. My father's commendation was there, dated 1998, awarded for field recovery in Bosnia. But the recipient now read Sutton, Miles P. My father's first and middle names, my sister's surname. She'd built her company's origin story on his stolen record. I sat back, the chair creaking. The smell of stale coffee filled the room, sour and metallic. My hands trembled, not from fear, from clarity. Paige hadn't just deleted him. She'd repainted him into her own mythology. At dawn, the bass loudspeaker cracked alive with reveille, trumpet echoing through concrete. The sky outside was the color of dull steel. I saved copies to a secure drive and slipped it into my uniform pocket. The metal pressed cold against my thigh, a reminder of weight, of evidence, of risk. On my way out, I passed General Huxley in the corridor. He stopped, studying my face like a puzzle he half remembered. Long night, Captain? Yes, sir. Good. The honest ones lose sleep. He walked on without waiting for a reply. By noon, rumors had begun to crawl through the base network. An internal audit, whistleblower talk, contractor corruption. None of it named me, yet. Paige called. Her voice came honey smooth through the line. June, heard you're poking around the audit servers. That could look ambitious. I'm doing my job. That's what Dad always said before he broke things he didn't understand. A pause. You think you're fixing something, but you're about to drag our name through mud. Again. My name's already there. The silence that followed was surgical. Then, you'll burn Dad's name with yours. I stared at the folder on my desk, the USB drive glinting in the light like a bullet casing. He did that long ago, I said, and hung up. Night again. Arthur met me behind the admin building, where the floodlights buzzed and the air smelled of rain. He carried a thermos of black coffee and handed it over. The warmth seeped through my gloves. He signed, What now? I'm joining the task force officially. They need logistics eyes on the contractor files. I can hide in plain sight. He nodded, slow. You're brave. No, I'm methodical. He smiled. Same thing, when done right. The thunder cracked overhead, scattering dust from the eaves. I felt the vibration in my ribs. Arthur, I asked, if I fail... He interrupted with a single sign. Then I'll sign for you. I didn't trust my voice, so I saluted instead. Later, I placed the drive inside my father's old commendation folder, the empty one he'd once used for his pay stubs. The plastic smelled faintly of mildew and tobacco. That folder was my new weapon. If honor was paperwork, then I would turn paperwork into justice. The next morning, I found a message taped to my locker, typed, unsigned. Stop digging, Captain. Some names were erased for a reason. When I opened the locker, the folder was gone. The locker door slammed with a sound like gunfire. Inside, nothing. Not even the smell of paper left behind. Just cold metal and a faint trace of my own perfume from the day before. Someone had taken the folder. For a long second, I stood still, listening. The hallway was empty except for the buzz of fluorescent lights and the hum of a vending machine. My reflection stared back from the locker's steel, pale, furious, frightened. Then I heard footsteps. 2 MPs turned the corner. One nodded. Captain Whitaker? General wants to see you. I followed them through corridors that smelled of waxed floor and suspicion. General Huxley's office was brighter than I expected, sunlight bouncing off the metals in their glass cases. He was alone, jacket off, reading something on a tablet. Close the door, he said. I did. The click echoed. He gestured to the chair. I hear you've been chasing ghosts in the contractor archives. I said nothing. The smell of his coffee, strong, bitter, filled the air between us. Off the record, he continued. You found something, didn't you? I studied his face. Weathered lines, but eyes sharp. Yes, sir. Then you already know what happens next. People will call it a misunderstanding. They'll drown you in forms and friendly advice. Then one day you'll find your transfer papers signed by someone you've never met. He leaned back. You want to fix this, you'll need protection, quietly. I'm not asking for protection, sir. Just access. He smiled, half proud, half sad. The brave ones always say that, until they realize bravery and loneliness are twins. He slid a keycard across the desk. Audit room 3, night access, you didn't get it from me. His hand brushed mine as I took it. Warm, calloused, deliberate. Captain, he added, if they erased your father, they'll try to erase you next. Move fast. That night, I returned to audit room 3. The lights flickered, casting long bars of shadow across the floor. The air reeked of ozone from overworked machines. I used the keycard. The door beeped green. Inside, every terminal was offline except one. Mine. On the monitor, a single message blinked. Stop, or we stop you. Then the screen went black. I yanked the drive from my pocket, backup copy number 2, and slotted it in. The monitor flared alive again, this time showing my own personnel file. Pages scrolled automatically, ending on one line. Subject under disciplinary review. Data breach investigation pending. They were already framing me. I shut everything down and pocketed the drive. The sound of boots outside made my stomach tighten. Someone rattled the door handle. Locked. Then silence. I stayed that way, breathing shallow, heart hammering, until the footsteps faded. Arthur Bellamy found me at dawn, sitting on the steps outside the barracks. He carried 2 paper cups of coffee. One for him, one for me. The steam smelled like burnt sugar. He signed, "They came for you?" I nodded. "You still have the truth?" I tapped my chest. "Right here." He studied me for a moment, then signed, "Then tell it before they rewrite it." I looked out over the parade field. The flag whipped hard in the morning wind, snapping like an impatient hand. "If I speak up," I said, "I'll take Paige down too. She's family." Arthur's fingers moved slowly, each sign heavy with meaning. Blood built the wall. Truth knocks it down. I didn't answer. The wind carried the smell of wet grass and jet fuel. Somewhere far off, a trumpet called for formation. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small metal pin, the old insignia for Communications Corps. Tarnished, edges smooth from years of touch. My hearing went, but my hands still talk, he signed. "Use it when you testify." I ran my thumb along the pin's rough surface. It felt like grit and history. By noon, Paige's number lit up my phone again. I answered this time. "You've made quite the mess," she said. The sound of ice clinking in her glass traveled clean across the line. "I didn't steal anything, Paige. You did." A low laugh. "You think anyone cares who typed what 20 years ago? You think honor is still a currency? It used to be. And look where it got Dad." Her tone sharpened. "You want to be the Army's moral compass? Go ahead. But when this hits the press, you'll be the girl who destroyed her father twice. First by disappointing him, then by exposing his ghost. Better that than selling it. You always were dramatic. I learned from the best." She hung up. The silence left behind felt colder than any reprimand. I filed my official report that evening, a summary of discrepancies, attached documents, cross-verified logs. Every sentence felt like a detonation. When I hit send, my hand trembled. The click of the mouse echoed like a trigger pull. Then, I waited. Hours passed. Rain started soft at first, then hard enough to rattle the window panes. The smell of wet concrete filled the room. At 0200, my inbox pinged. Subject, hearing request approved. Federal Review Board. Board location, Fort Liberty HQ, Conference Room 1A. Time, 0900, 2 days later. I exhaled, half relief, half terror. Next morning, the base cafeteria buzzed louder than usual. Whispers followed me like smoke. Whistleblower. Rat. Hero. Depends who you asked. Someone had taped a photocopy of my ID badge to the bulletin board, red marker circling my face with the words, Honor Police. I tore it down and walked out. The paper crumpled in my fist felt damp from sweat. General Huxley found me near the parade field. He didn't speak at first, just watched the recruits drilling, the rhythm of boots against pavement. Then he said, They're afraid of you now. That's good. I'm not sure it feels good. Truth never does. He turned to me. When you stand before that board, don't shout. Don't justify. Just show them the facts. Let silence make the case. He paused, eyes narrowing. You remind me of your father, but not the version he showed the world. The one who questioned orders and hated what metals made of men. That caught me off guard. He questioned orders? Once, in Bosnia. Tried to report falsified commendations. Got buried under bureaucracy. The system taught him to stay quiet. Maybe you're his unfinished sentence. He left me with that and the scent of tobacco from his coat lingering in the air. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. Every sound, the tick of the clock, the hiss of the radiator, felt amplified. I opened my drawer and pulled out my father's old letter again. The one that said, A soldier's silence is proof of endurance, not weakness. For the first time, I realized he'd been wrong. Silence wasn't endurance. It was surrender. I tore the letter neatly in half and slipped the pieces into my pocket. They'd come with me to the hearing, not as relics, but evidence of evolution. When I arrived at HQ the next morning, the corridor outside the hearing room buzzed with reporters and brass. Paige was already there, immaculate in her tailored suit, smiling for cameras. As I passed, she leaned close enough for me to smell her perfume. Expensive, sharp, like polished steel. Careful, June, she whispered. Truth can be lonely when nobody claps. I smiled back, quiet and steady. They won't need to clap, I said. They'll stand. The doors opened. The hearing room was colder than I expected. Air conditioning hissed like steady rain, cutting through the murmur of voices and the soft click of camera shutters. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, bleaching every face to the same uneasy pallor. Rows of uniforms lined the benches, majors, colonels, a handful of civilians in dark suits. At the far end of the long table sat the board, 5 officers, flanked by a federal attorney. General Huxley took the seat behind them, not as judge, but observer. Still, everyone felt his presence like gravity. Paige sat across from me, spine straight, lipstick surgical. In front of her, a folder marked Sutton Defense Solutions, proprietary data. In front of me, one old commendation folder, worn at the edges. A photographer's flash popped, washing the room white. The gavel struck wood. Captain June Whitaker, the chair began, you've submitted an allegation of falsified commendations and data suppression involving Sutton Defense Solutions. You understand the gravity of these claims? Yes, sir. My voice was steadier than my pulse. Proceed. I stood. The room's smell, coffee, ink, polished leather, felt heavy, like breathing through history. I laid the first document on the table, a printed procurement log. This is a record of file migrations conducted in 2016 during a contractor transfer managed by Sutton Defense Solutions. Over 200 commendation records were moved to private servers. 37 were deleted outright. A colonel adjusted his glasses. And your father's file? Among them, Sergeant Miles J. Whitaker, Bosnia, 1998. Field recovery under fire? Commendation reissued under another name. Which name? I slid the second page forward. Miles P. Sutton. A ripple of murmurs rolled through the room. Paige didn't flinch. She crossed her legs, calm as a surgeon. The colonel frowned. You're suggesting your sister intentionally falsified? I'm not suggesting. I'm proving. I connected the external drive. The projector hummed to life, its lens throwing a hot circle of light across the screen. On it appeared side-by-side commendations. Same date, same citation, identical signature, one name swapped. The audience leaned forward. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan. Paige spoke at last, her voice silk-wrapped iron. These are clerical redundancies, Captain. The migration was automated. If you understood the scale of our operations, you'd know errors happen. I turned toward her. Errors don't include forged signatures and duplicate medals, or purged archives. The attorney raised a hand. Let her finish, Captain. Paige leaned in slightly, eyes gleaming. I admire your persistence, but you're weaponizing family trauma. Dad's death left gaps. You're trying to fill them with conspiracy. I took a slow breath, the air sharp with ozone from the projector. You deleted him. You sold his name to buy credibility, and you used veterans' records as currency. Gasps flickered through the gallery. Paige's mask cracked. Just a flicker. You're out of your depth, little sister. Maybe. I reached for the next file, but I learned how to swim. I laid out the printed logs one by one. Each paper hit the table with a sound like a drum beat. Miles Whitaker, Miles Sutton. James Field, JF Defense Grant. Arthur Bellamy, file missing. At that, Arthur himself stood from the back row. He wore his old service cap, hands trembling slightly but steady enough to sign. Truth survives deletion. The cameras caught it. Whispers turned to silence. Paige exhaled through her nose like a boxer before a punch. He's not even testifying. This is theater. I looked at Arthur. No, I said. It's translation. He smiled faintly and sat down again. The chair of the board cleared his throat. Captain Whitaker, do you have any corroboration that Miss Sutton personally authorized these actions? I nodded. Her digital key signature appears in the logs, but I also have this. From my pocket, I unfolded the torn letter from my father, the halves now taped together. My father once tried to report falsified commendations in Bosnia. His superior dismissed him for lack of evidence. The same signature from that dismissal order reappears on Sutton's migration files. Paige used the archived authorization form as cover. She copied a dead man's clearance. Paige shot to her feet. That's absurd. The chair raised a hand. Sit down, Miss Sutton. Her heel clicked against tile as she obeyed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. I continued quietly. My father believed silence was endurance. I believed him until I saw what silence does. It lets thieves build monuments out of other people's honor. My voice steadied. I'm done being silent. The colonel glanced at the general. General Huxley, you served with Sergeant Whitaker, did you not? Huxley rose. The movement was slow, deliberate, commanding. His uniform caught the light, every ribbon gleaming like old currency, finally cleaned. I did, he said. His voice was gravel wrapped in respect. He was the kind of man who saluted even when no one was looking. If his daughter says this is true, I believe her. Paige turned toward him. With all due respect, General, belief isn't evidence. No, Huxley said, stepping forward, but sometimes it's the start of justice. He faced the board. My recommendation, reinstate Sergeant Whitaker's commendation, posthumously, and open a full investigation into Sutton Defense Solutions. The board chair hesitated. That's highly irregular. Honor usually is. The silence that followed was electric. Cameras clicked. The air smelled faintly of sweat and paper ink. Then, without waiting for permission, Huxley turned toward me. He raised his hand in a salute, slow, deliberate, precise. The sound of his sleeve brushing the fabric was the loudest thing in the room. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Then the entire room stood. One by one, officers rose, chairs scraping the floor, until the noise became a low thunder of acknowledgement. Paige stared, lips parted, but no words left to sell. I returned the salute. My hand didn't shake. Afterward, I stood alone at the front, papers scattered like spent shells. The general lowered his arm, eyes steady. Your father's honor was never lost, he said softly, just waiting for someone with the patience to find it. The smell of burnt projector bulb hung in the air, a faint reminder of light that had worked too hard. I nodded. Thank you, sir. He shook his head. Don't thank me, Captain. You did what soldiers are supposed to do. Show up. He saluted once more and said, for some names, silence was never the right uniform. The press exploded that night. Quiet soldier restores honor. Video clips of the salute looped across every network. The moment the room stood became emblematic. The Fort Liberty silence, they called it. But for me, the noise didn't matter. The victory wasn't loud, it was clean. That evening, I found Paige waiting by the parking lot, rain falling in silver lines across her windshield. She didn't speak at first, just held out a small box, the original medal. Her voice cracked when she finally said, he'd have wanted you to have it. I took it, cool metal pressing into my palm. He wanted us both to earn it. She looked down. Maybe now we will. Then she walked away, heels clicking into the rain. Back in my quarters, I pinned the medal beside my father's photo. For the first time, the reflection staring back didn't look like a disgrace. Outside, thunder rolled again. Distant, ceremonial, like an old soldier's applause. When I woke the next morning, the base was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No marching boots, no loudspeakers, just wind moving through the flagpoles with a hollow, metallic hum. The medal lay on my desk, catching a blade of sunlight through the blinds. It glowed faintly, almost breathing. My inbox was full. Messages from the board, from the inspector general, from strangers with military addresses. Most began the same way. Thank you for not staying quiet. I didn't read them all. The truth didn't need congratulations. By noon, an official memo confirmed it. Sergeant Miles J. Whitaker's commendation reinstated. Paige Sutton, under federal review. The line that mattered most was small, almost an afterthought. Captain June Whitaker commended for integrity and service distinction. I read it twice, then closed the laptop. The air smelled of printer ink and coffee gone cold. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to do anything. Paige called that night. I let it ring once, then answered. Her voice was hoarse. It's over. They'll take the company apart. I know. I never meant for Dad's record to disappear. It was just leverage. Once you have leverage, people listen. Until they stop. She sighed. You always thought honor was some sacred relic. I thought it was a tool. Maybe we were both wrong. No, I said quietly. Honor's not a tool. It's a mirror. You just broke yours first. She didn't reply, just whispered, Mom wants to see you. The line went dead before I could answer. 2 weeks later, I drove back to the family house. The front porch sagged a little more, the flagpole rusted at its base. Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish and thyme. Mom was sitting in Dad's old chair, a blanket around her legs, a framed copy of the reinstatement letter on the side table. You did it, she said softly. You fixed what he couldn't. I just finished it, I replied. She nodded, eyes glistening. He'd have been proud. Someday. The words were strange but true. Dad had never been a man who gave pride freely. Maybe that made it worth earning. When I returned to Fort Liberty, I didn't go back to logistics. I asked for reassignment, and they gave it to me. 3 months later, the Veterans Access and Inclusion Center opened its doors in an old admin building near the south gate. The paint still smelled new. The floors creaked. But every week more veterans came. Some blind, some deaf, some lost, between wars and paperwork. Arthur Bellamy became our first volunteer. He ran the front desk now, hands always in motion, signing to each visitor with the patience of someone who had already forgiven the world. Sometimes he'd sign across the room to me. Calm hands, Captain. You won. And I'd sign back. We did. The center wasn't glamorous. There were no cameras now, no generals watching, but it was alive. Quiet, consistent, necessary. That was enough. One evening, after everyone had gone, I locked the office and stepped outside. The sun was sinking behind the barracks, washing the sky in amber and smoke. The air smelled of rain on asphalt. I walked to the parade field, the same one where I'd once stood invisible under my father's shadow. The grass whispered in the wind. From my pocket, I took the restored medal. The metal was warm from my skin. I held it up to the fading light until it gleamed red, then set it down gently at the base of the flagpole. No ceremony, no speech, just presence. Behind me, I heard a faint tap of wheels on concrete. Arthur had followed, his chair rolling slow over the uneven path. He didn't say anything, just lifted his hand and signed, "Thank you." I signed back, "For what?" He smiled, "For showing up." We stayed like that until the lights came on across the field, flooding everything in soft gold. The hum of the transformers became a kind of music. Later that night, I walked the empty corridors alone. Each door carried a small plaque: records, benefits, outreach. Under mine, a smaller one read simply, "Integrity Office." The irony made me smile. Inside, I found a letter waiting on my desk. No return address, just my name written in steady block letters. Inside was a single line on government stationery: "Your father's commendation has been archived permanently. Case closed." At the bottom, a handwritten note in slanted cursive, "L. Huxley." I closed the envelope and placed it beside the medal. The two objects, metal and paper, felt like opposite ends of the same truth. That night, sleep came easily. I dreamed of silence, but not the kind that hurts, the kind that listens. The parade field again, empty, the air sharp, clean, new. I walked across it in uniform, no medals, no fanfare, just the weight of morning on my shoulders. The horizon burned pale orange. At the center, I stopped, turned toward the rising sun, and signed one simple word: "Thank you." Not to my father, not to the army, to the act of staying. The wind moved through the flag above me, snapping once like a salute. For the first time, I felt peace without permission. When family shame burns your name, integrity is the only uniform left to wear. When the world calls you a disgrace, remember, silence can still stand tall. Some stories don't shout, they stand. Subscribe and stand with them.